A very good morning to all of you. So raptors are some of the least studied birds around the world, including all the birds that we have seen studies on. These birds are facing threats such as population decline, habitat loss, and poisoning as in the case of vultures and barred eagle. One such bird found in India is Pallas fish eagle. These birds are distributed across the Southeast Asia and Central Asia. They follow the migratory route from southern Russia to Indian subcontinent during their winter where they breed. The breeding season is from November to May with, with number hatchlings 2 to 3. Their hatchling periods, incubation period is 40 to 45 days. It requires 60 days for chicks to fledge. They show a very high nest fertility. Their diet includes water birds, fishes, mammals, and reptiles. These birds are classified as endangered under the red list of IUCN. Historical record shows that the bird was found breeding in Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Central Asia, and Iran, but now they are possibly extinct. As you can see in the map, their current breeding ground is India and Bangladesh. In 1926, there were 26 breeding pairs of Pallas fish eagles that were found in Pakistan. Now there are only 5. But what is happening in the Indian subcontinent? From Kaziranga, we have a study in the mid 90s where 9 breeding pairs were recorded, and after that, there has been no further studies. So, what drives the nest site selection in these large raptors? Its resource availability, their easy accessibility to nest, wantage for territorial defense, and the structural integrity of the nest, which also means the safety of nest, so that they can withstand the harsh weather. With this, Pallas fish eagle have so many of research that this is the most understudied bird in the Indian subcontinent. We don't know the population status and distribution of Pallas fish eagle in India. We don't have idea of their preferred habitat and feeding grounds, and we don't know a lot about their nesting ecology. Few of the accounts pop up in general of BHNS when Naroji tells about there was a nest in Kosi above Wuhan, which is still there. With this background, the title of my study is Selection in Pallas fish eagle and their nesting behavior. So I had two objectives. First, the nest site selection, which is to understand the factor of affecting tree selection and to understand the factors affecting nest site selection at a landscape level. The other objective is to understand the predation pressure and nest guarding in Pallas fish eagle. With this, I have two questions. What are the different bird species co-occurring at the nest? And then what is the change in parental presence on the nest with respect to age of the nestling? My study area is the Rajaji Corbett landscape, which is a 10,000 square kilometer area, which has a 10,000 square kilometer area, and this is one of the stronghold for the current breeding grounds for these birds. So how did I select the survey areas? We had previously 8 known location of nest in this landscape. Then we had communication with forest department, and I used the EWA data where you can see there these are the Pallas fish eagle sightings, and these are clustered at Ganga, Ramganga Reservoir and the Kosi Reservoir, and it's exactly where most of my nests were located. You can see here the nests are located in almost at the same places. My the methodology. The field survey was carried out in the month of February, and behavior sampling was done in the last week of January, the month of March and April. The survey for the Pallas fish eagle nest was concentrated along the banks of the rivers, which include Ganga, Kolu, Ramganga, Kosi, Ramganga Reservoir, and these were my variables. For nest tree selection, I sampled nearest tree within 45 degree of every nest to collect covariates such as species of the nesting tree and neighboring tree, height of the trees, GBH, and distance from the tree. GBH less than 50 centimeter, trees with GBH less than 50 centimeter were excluded from the nearest trees. For behavioral sampling, there were two observers who did behavior on three nests for 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, to note interactions such as different bird species, their interaction with the other species, and nest guarding by the parents. A total of 12 nests were found, out of which 11 were active. And from my field observation, I confirm that 6 nests had fledged, but about other nests I have no idea. Maybe they have fledged earlier. These are the all the species of trees that I found nest on, and these are the basic measurements. To see the selectivity for species, I ran Jacob-Webb selectivity index, where Holoptilia antigrifolia was preferred most due to less number of trees in the available trees. Yet Bombay Siva has the most number of trees. This graph depicts that out of 12, 9 were present in top 10% of the height of trees. The red dot signifies the actual position of nest, while the blue bar is the height of the tree. The number indicates the height of the nest. To see that the taller trees were preferred, the available trees were stacked with the nest trees, and we can see that 20 to 40 meter of height was highly preferred by these birds. I ran a GLM model with height as my variable to see the effect of tree site selection on nesting. To see the effect of nest site selection on landscape level, I randomly generated points on my survey area, only on my survey area, to see if these are anyway contributing. Their water and building were found to be significantly affecting these. The probability of finding a nest decreases as we move away from the water. The probability of nest increases as we move away from the human settlement, and it showed a less significant relation with the openness of the area, since they prefer trees which are sparsely located or trees which are not in a dense canopy. For my behavior sampling, we found that crow was mostly present in the Chilla site. The site was very close to human habitation, thus increasing the number of crows, while others saw a normal trend with other raptors and crows. For parental presence, we saw that Andher and Anjani were least disturbed, as they show a general trend of decrease in parental presence on the nest as the chick grows. But for Chilla, the birds were not present on the nest since they were busy chasing all the crows. So here are the conclusion from our study. The tree had a significant effect on nest tree selection. Distance to water positively influenced nest site selection. Distance to human settlement had a negative effect. Crows were most frequently observed species at various sites with the number of interactions influenced by their proximity to humans. General trend shows that the age of chick is directly related to the presence of parents on the nest. However, it could be crows which have resulted in high absence on nest tree. These are my acknowledgements. I like to thank all these people for helping me during the studies. Sir, Chilla has extremely high number of crows. Whenever there were crows, either in groups or single, the Pallas has to chase them away because they were seen, with my observation, steal away the food and even pecking on the chicks. So it became important for the Pallas to continuously chase them away. Yes, sir.
So the most important part of your data set is the presence or absence of the parents,
Yes, sir.
the presence or absence of the groups. So what's the output? Does it have an impact on the success of the nest?
I think so because sir, we had information on Chilla that there were three eggs, and out of which only two survived. It could be other reasons also, but the bird was not able to tend to their chicks, like their feeding or even say keeping the temperature in the nest. So it could be, but we need more number of sample to see if the crows are actually having an effect on their.
But don't you think, see, the business of crows, they show a nest building, right?
Yes, sir.
For 30 years, 20 years, the nest is empty. Don't you think the bird should learn more the time the presence of crows if they show such a strong nest fidelity, if they know that if we breed here, the crows are going to disturb us, we are not going to get the right type of the amount of food which is required. Then the bird comes again at the same place to the nest.
Absolutely true, sir. But what I think it also requires them a lot of effort to build nests which are as wide as 2 meter and as deep as 1 meter. That will also go into consideration that this bird would maybe chase away the crows rather than building a new nest, finding a new nest. But I think more study will be required to see if they. I mean, they have a high site fidelity. There is no doubt about it. It could be other pair also, since this literature doesn't suggest if the same birds are nesting on the same exact nest, but the nest fidelity is still there.
You saw the nest for quite a bit. So, any naturalistic observations that you had when to the chicks, like when do they start moving around quite a bit and etc.
Yes. So since all the three nests were in different stages of their development, the Andhir nest was the first to fledge. It fledged as early as the late March, while the Anjani nest it fledged in the mid May, after the mid May. Uh, the time period that literature suggests of 60 days, it could be close by because it took around 2 months for them to fledge. And for some reason, I didn't get a lot of data on their feeding, like the food that bird was providing to the chicks. So I was also in doubt that how are they still thriving? Maybe they are doing it either very early before the survey start. I started it at around 7 in winter. The 7 was still dark. So I believe that these are feeding the chicks less. Yes, yet the chick fledged, and apart from that, yeah.
So, Akshay,
Yes, sir.
what about the direction? The necessary selection is only covered for what about the position of the tree? We did not record the data of the position
Supposition
in
means.
terms of facing, whether it's east facing or south facing, north facing.
Okay. Yes, sir. I had aspect data as well.
So, on
It is a so I tried using GLM, but it was not a, how to say, important factor for this selection. Yes. Even slope and altitude were not found to be very important. Yes, sir. I mean, most of the nests were facing the river with sun rising behind them. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rakshit. Okay. As we know, Western Ghats is one of the highly biodiverse habitat across the globe. And what makes this habitat more diverse is the pristine forested habitats and the rivers and streams which flows through this landscape. And over a few decades, the habitat fragmentation and deforestation is a major threat to this landscape because of land use changes such as commercial plantations and agriculture. The diversity is at stake, and the the impact of these changes on uh, the impact of these changes on can be best monitored through indicator taxa such as aquatic insect communities, which depends on freshwater ecosystems for completion of their life cycle. And one such taxa which I studied for my dissertation is odonate, and my dissertation is titled as Effects of Land Use Changes on Odonate Assemblages in the Central Western Ghats. Why odonates are regarded as a good indicator is because of several factors. They have an amphibious life cycle where the larva lays eggs in aquatic habitat and develops inside it and emerges as adult into the terrestrial habitat. In both of these habitats, it is the apex insect predator, and they have a particular sets of habitat requirements which make them highly sensitive to any alterations in their habitats. And the major factors which influences these assemblages can be grouped into three broad categories: the vegetation structure, stream structure, and water quality parameters for several reasons. For vegetation, it is the perching or roosting sites for thermoregulation or as cover sites. And for stream structure, it's the available microhabitats or the available substrate composition. And in case of water quality parameters, as though it doesn't have a direct effect on the adults, it determines the fitness and survival of larva. And how does these land use affects the parameters that the factors that influences the ordinate assemblages is through several phenomena, maybe uh, the removal of vegetation or introduction of exotics to vegetation will alter the vegetation structure, and any changes in the sediment load or any alteration in flow or turbidity or any changes in the width will affect the assemblages. And in terms of water quality parameters, it is mainly that any changes in the variables such as temperature, pH, etc. There are two suborders under order Odonata, which differ in ecological preferences and their responses to environmental changes because of mainly three important factors. They are the thermal tolerance, body size, and dispersal ability. The dragonflies, which are uh, relatively bigger in body size, have high thermal tolerance, and with robust wing structure, uh, they have a good dispersal ability, which makes them exploit more habitats. But in case of damselflies, their body size is comparatively less, and they have relatively less thermal tolerance. And because of their delicate wing structure, they have lesser dispersal abilities, which makes them more reliant on sheltered habitats. Although there is Although there is clear taxonomic evidence, the taxonomic information is available across the globe. The studies have been extensive across the globe. But in to Indian context, there are very few studies which have attempted to assess the species habitat association by correlating different habitat variables or water quality parameters and their influence on the odonate assemblages. And there is a lack of studies which comprehend the responses of dragonflies and damselflies separately to land use changes at local scale. The local scale here means uh, not considering the landscape level factors. And with this, I would like to bring my two objectives for the study. Where in the first objective, I would like to evaluate the influence of vegetation structure, stream structure, and water quality parameters on the ordinate assemblages with a research question that what are the important variables influencing ordinate assemblages across the treatments. And the second objective is to understand the differences in composition of dragonflies and damselflies between the treatments. The question would be to look at how does the pattern of composition of dragonflies and damselflies differ between the treatments. And the study area which I selected for addressing these objectives is Someshwara Wildlife Sanctuary, which lies in the western slopes of Western Ghats and spread between Shivamogga and Udupi districts of Karnataka. And the major vegetation type of the sanctuary includes tropical evergreen forests, semi-evergreen and moist mixed deciduous forests. And there are also reserve forests of plantations of Eucalyptus ailanthus and teak attached to this sanctuary. And the adjoining areas and the village limits are dominated by plantations of arecanut and paddy agricultural fields. And with the absence of agricultural fields, agricultural crop at the time of sampling and gradual shift of agriculture to plantations in the landscape, I had only three treatments, where the first treatment was the streams which uh, had both banks as forest, and the second treatment is edge between the arecanut plantations and forest, and the third treatment is the streams which passes through plantation on both sides. And for sampling odonates, I laid 100-meter into 10-meter belt transects where I walked along the stream for 100 meter and recorded all the observations. And the sampling was done only during the clear sunny days between 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, where most of the species are active. And all the individuals were photographed and identified using the appropriate guides. For sampling vegetation, I laid 5-meter radius circular plots along both the banks of the stream, where canopy cover, structural intactness of trees, shrubs, and grasses, and equipment index were categorized. For sampling stream parameters, I divided the transect into 5 20-meter subplots, where total and wet stream width, depth, and flow were measured at 5 random points, and habitat type and substrate composition were quantified based on the proportion in each of these 20-meter subplots. And to measure the water quality parameters, the same 20-meter subplots, 5 random points were selected, and all these parameters were measured using aquaprobe and aquameter. Coming into the results, I would like to highlight the sampling efficiency of the overall study. and to compare them between the dragonflies and damselflies. The damselflies were relatively well sampled, which is evident from the asymptotic graphs. Asymptotic graphs and in both individual based and sample based rarefaction curves. And the dragonflies were relatively less sampled in terms of the number of individuals sampled for forest and the plantation communities. But in sample base, it is showing a trend of asymptote. And to understand the trends of dominance diversity curve, the most dominant species in all the three treatments were different, and the evenness values and diversity values were comparable between plantation and edge, whereas it was the lowest in forest. The trend of dominance diversity curve shows that the most dominant species across the treatments is same for damselflies, and the highest absolute richness diversity and evenness values uh, were for edge, followed by plantation and forest sites. And to understand the compositional differences, I use non-metric multidimensional scaling analysis and validated with the analysis of similarity in terms of the percentage of similarity or dissimilarity between them. The percentage of dissimilarity was least for edge and forest plantations, and it was maximum for forest and plantation. And as you can see, there were 4 unique species to plantation and 1 unique species to the edge community. But the 2 species mentioned here in the forest communities are not unique to the forest communities, but they were highly abundant, which is why the uh, the weightage is more towards the forest community. And in case of damselflies, the trend was slightly different, where the compositional dissimilarity was maximum between forest and edge, and the least was between edge and plantation. And there were 5 unique species to the edge community. They all belong to a single family Coagulinidae. And to understand the relationship between variables in dragonfly assemblages, I used canonical correspondence analysis where I had around 10 variables as environmental variables and overlaid with the abundance distribution of the species. And the major contribution was from the variables canopy cover, ambient temperature, and water temperature. And there was a little bit clustering of uh, points for forest communities, and the plantation and edge communities were dispersed more. And the weightage of the clustering was more towards the uh, center of both the axes. Um, and for damselflies assemblages, the relationship was almost similar, although the the species were more scatteredly distributed here, but there was a clear clustering of forest, but more spread across for edge and plantation communities. And the factors in which had maximum influence were the same, and with along with flow rate and pH with high values. And to summarize and conclude the results, I would like to bring up a point that there was a evidence of edge effect, because in maximum cases the abundance or the absolute richness or the evenness were higher in the edge communities, uh, although there was more tendency of plantation communities towards the edge than forest communities. And the habitat variables which had most influence were canopy cover and ambient temperature, and in terms of water quality parameters, it was pH and water temperature which were driving the communities. Although they are not regarded to influence the adult assemblages much, there are still evidences that pH and water temperature are crucial for selecting the habitat, the home position sites and breeding habitats in case of ornaments. And I would like to acknowledge these people who have helped me in this completing this study. And thank you.
Is there any competition between of resources in that itself? I have no idea.
Uh, the competition is very less between them because the strata they occupy is slightly different and they have a particular ecological preferences. Like the damselflies mostly prefer the sheltered habitats more, but the dragonflies are more generalist in terms of the habitats or the microhabitats they occupy.
What about the resources they use?
Uh, it's the same.
You expect partition.
Yes, sir.
Do you think there was any effect of seasonality on the results that you saw? You're doing this in winter, no that.
Yeah, but I started in late January, the sampling, and during that particular time in that study area, the temperature was uh, around like more than 27, so it had no effect on the assembly so much.
So do you think is this the larger landscape changes or the microclimate around the streams?
Sir, in this study, I basically selected, I did not select a larger area and did not consider any landscape variables. So the landscape variables might have an effect if I look into the catchment area aspect into it, but for this I can't say that.
No more questions. So last one, again back to competition. Do you think that resource, just if you can go back the two communities, so where dragonflies and flies overlap, do you see any intense competition with our resource or they are evolutionarily segregated in terms of the structure there? Body structure, wings and other life stages?
Yes, sir. I think the the way they have evolved is like in terms of the wing structure and the ability of them to disperse to different habitat has made them like segregate in terms of the preference of habitats they have. Like they are known to eat each other. Like there is cannibalistic behavior in them also, but the competition is not in terms of what you know,
In case of climate change, which one will suffer more?
the dance and plays will suffer most.
Thank you. I don't know.
Next up, we have Mr. whose dissertation is titled Broken Langur Distribution, Habitat Selection, and Corridor Connectivity, Assessing Patterns and Addressing Threats. Rishi exhibits a profound passion for the study of mammals with a particular focus on primate. He intends to work in the field of wildlife conservation and management with the implementation of technology. He notes that his dissertation is a step in that direction. All the best, Rishi.
Knowledge study. Yeah, can you increase the size of the screen? नीचे का बोर्ड भाग रहा है तो इसको Thank you for the invitation. Sorry, I want to be small. Sorry for delay. I just have to check one small correction.
Sorry for the delay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rishi Basumatari, and for my M.Sc dissertation, I did study on Langur on the topic titled Langur distribution, habitat selection, and corridor connectivity, assessing pattern and addressing threats. Langur is rare endangered colobal primate discovered in the early 20th century. It is endemic to Indian subcontinent, found only in western Assam in India and south central Bhutan. In India and Bhutan, the Langur is protected as Schedule 1 species under Wildlife Protection Act 1972 and Bhutan's Nature and Forest Conservation Act 1995. Over the last 30 years, the Langur population in India has declined over its entire range, leaving behind some 6,000 to 6,500 mature individuals. It is reported that the rate of decline in India is well above 16%. The Langur population in India is highly fragmented, with the population in the south completely cut off from the population in the Bhutan. However, despite the high fragmentation, Langur's troops are reported to move from one fragmented forest to another through village forest patches and home gardens. But all this movement and dispersal comes with a greater risk to their life. Several Langur mortality and injury incidents, mostly due to electrocution and road accidents, are reported mostly in the southern population. Given the alarming rate of high habitat fragmentation and increase in threats such as electrocution, road accident faced by Langur in India, I came up with the following objective. My first objective is to understand current distribution, habitat suitability, and corridor connectivity in highly fragmented southern population. To address my first objective, I came with the following question. What is the current distribution of Langur in India? What are the factors influencing habitat suitability of Langur in India? Is there any connectivity remaining for the highly fragmented southern population? For my first objective, my study area includes the entire Langur distribution ranges in India, which is about 2,500 square kilometer. Majority of my study area falls under the administration of Bodoland Territorial Region, except 5 forest fragments in southern population. To assess the spatial distribution and habitat suitability and to identify key environmental factors as constraining Langur distribution in India, I use M.Sc. M.Sc is a program that predicts species distribution based on presence only data. So I collected a total of 187 presence locations. 51 Langur presence locations were collected from 9 fragmented forests in the southern population. I led a grid of 1 by 1 square kilometer. I walked a total of 123 trails. The other Langur presence data collected from the southern population includes 16 opportunistic sighting and 56 mortality and injury incidents, which I have collected from the forest department. Additionally, I also collected 64 Langur presence locations from Manas Tiger Reserve, including Ramona National Park and Sirang River Reserve Forest, from the researcher working in the landscape. I further filter these presence locations using SPT packages in R, such as retaining only one location in 500-meter radius. I also consider 10 predictor variables, which include both ecogeographical and anthropogenic variables. I collected these 10 variables from various websites and sources. I extracted this variable at 250 into 250 meter spatial resolution, since the movement of the Langur varied from 200 meter to 700 meter. Prior to modeling, multicollinearity between the variables were also observed. I dropped the variable with high correlation, taking only the variable that is highly explainable that is ecologically explainable. Finally, I ran the Maxen model with 148 retail presence location with 100 bootstrap, randomly assigning presence location as 70% training and 30% test. To assess the corridor connectivity in the highly fragmented southern population, I use CircuitScape. CircuitScape is a program that borrows algorithm from electronic circuit theory to predict connectivity in heterogeneous landscape. I inversely converted the values of habitat suitability output from the Maxen such as each pixel represent a value ranging from 0 to 1, in where higher values indicate more resistance. The Maxen model predicted 1778 square kilometer as potential distribution area for Langur in India with 3 distinct clusters. First cluster in Ramona National Park and Siram Reserve Forest in the northwest, western part of Manas Tiger Reserve in the east, and highly fragmented forest in the south population, which include Chocosila Wildlife Sanctuary and 8 other reserve forests. The Golden Langur cluster in Ramona National Park, Siram Reserve Forest in the northern west and western part of Manas Tiger Reserve is well protected and are connected to the continuous with the population in the Bhutan. The model also identified 883 square kilometer area as highly suitable for golden langur with occurrence probability higher than 0.5. The most important factor affecting golden langur habitat suitability is the forest cover, which is found to contribute 80% to the model, followed by human footprint. The model predicts that with increase in human footprint, there is a decrease in the habitat suitability of golden langur. Same as with the cropland, which contribute 4.6 to the model. The CircuitScape outputs high conductance for corridor between Korangaon Reserve Forest and Bamungao. Also, high conductance for corridor between Kakuzala Reserve Forest and Bamungao. The other corridors identified for the southeast population is between Bhuveshwar Hill Reserve Forest and Nakati Hill Reserve Forest and Kakuzala. The other corridor identified for golden langur in the southwest population is between Nadangiri Reserve Forest and Chokosila Wildlife Sanctuary through rubber plantation in Naigao. The corridor includes some of the village forests between these reserve forests, which golden langurs are seen to use. As we can see that the mortality records such as electrocution and road accident location points is evident that golden langur has used these areas to move from one fragmented forest to the another. Also, it is evident from the corridor connectivity result that there is a corridor existing in between these isolated fragmented forests. Coming to my second and third objective, my second objective is to investigate group demography and fine-scale habitat selection of golden langur in highly fragmented southern population. To address my second objective, I came with the following question: how is group composition as sex ratio of golden langur in highly fragmented southern population? What are the factors influencing fine-scale habitat selection of golden langur in highly fragmented southern population? My third objective is to assess the threats of golden langur in highly fragmented southern population. To address my third objective, I came up with a question: what are the threats associated with golden langur in highly fragmented southern population? The study area for my second and third objective is mostly focused in the 9 fragmented isolated forest patch in southern population, which include Chokosila Wildlife Sanctuary in Kokradar and Bongaigaon districts. The most of the forest fragments in southern population are scrubland and degraded forests with some Ericana plantation and rubber. Coming to the data collection, I laid 1 by 1 square kilometer grid in these 9 fragmented forests. I walked 123 trails ranging from 0.4 km to 1.6 km. At each langur sighting, individuals were counted and classified into different sex categories based on Visuals et al. 2002. I also collected both vegetation structure and anthropogenic data at each Langur sighting as well as at every 200-meter individuals, thus accounting a total of 526 plots for my vegetation and anthropogenic data sampling. The broad vegetation data structure include tree species composition, abundance, and canopy cover and canopy height. The anthropogenic pressure that I have collected include presence of invasive plant species, signs of wood cutting and lopping, presence of dogs, humans, and livestock. I also collected injury and mortality incidents records recorded in the last 6 years from Forest Department. I found a total of 29 erosion incidents, a total of 17 road accident incidents, and 9 other death incidents. Coming to the data analysis, to compare the mean group size and sex ratio and anthropogenic pressures between different protected regions of the fragmented forest, I use Crustal-Wallis test. I also use t-test to compare the mean group size, sex ratio, and anthropogenic pressure between wildlife sanctuary and reserve forest. Prior to this test, I performed normality test, which is a separation test. I performed separation test. Talking about habitat selection, I fitted generalized linear model. I took 13 predicted variables that I have collected both from fieldwork and as well as from various websites. I took Langur detection as response variable and side as random effect and other predicted variable as fixed effect. Coming to the result, I encountered a total of 51 troops with 449 individuals, including 8 multi-male, multi-female groups and 5 all-male groups. The overall mean group size was estimated 9.78, with standard error 0.6. The mean group size of golden langur in different protected regimes was found not much significant. However, the ratio of infant to female between wildlife sanctuary and reserve forest was found significant. I also compared the average ratio of infant to female between different protected regimes. Here also I found the ratio of infant to female highest in wildlife sanctuary. The generalized linear mixed effective model predicts tree species diversity as the most influencing factor for the golden langur habitat for the golden langur's occurrence probability with AICC value 33.97. The identified threats were wood cutting and lopping, presence of human, dogs and livestock, presence of invasive plant species. The study found that wood cutting and lopping density is highest in wildlife sanctuary. The encounter rates of livestock were frequent, highest in private rubber plantation and adjoining forest. The invasive species like Cromolena odorata is found distributed in all fragmented forests, highest in private rubber plantation and adjoining forests. The high percentage of livestock encounter rate in rubber plantation and high percentage of Cromolena odorata in adjoining rubber plantation and adjoining forest could be because of the high disturbance in these areas. I also collected a total of 56 mortality and injury incidents of the last 6 years. I found that majority of the golden langur mortality was due to electrocution followed by road accident. Majority of the road accident was found to happen in state highway and national highway. The majority of road accident happened in 2003. This may be because before 2023, the national highway that separates the forest fragments in south population were two-lane highway. But after 2023, this road was made 4-lane, and since because of that there is a high mortality of golden langur in 2023. I also found high electrocution in 2023. This may be because Golden longurs are found to move from one fragmented forest to another. As because the national highway was widened, the golden langur that has come from fragment forest to the village are not able to cross the national highway because of the widening of the road. So they are restricted to remain in the village. In village, there are lots of distribution lines. So there is a chance that they have come in contact mostly with the electrification line in this area. I, with the data on 29 electrocutions, I predict high electrocution rates. I use Maxent model to predict the potential vulnerable electrocution sites in the fragmented population. Since I do not have variables for distribution line, I took distance to road as a proxy to distribution line. I went to the field, I digitalized the road. I also checked that the power line, that the distribution line is all along the road. I extracted this variable at 250 into 250 with a special distribution. I also perform multi-collinearity between variables prior to modeling. Finally, I trained a Maxent model with 26 recurrent global locations. The model predicts high probability of electrocution at the forest edge. It is found that distance to forest edge contributed 36.4% to the electrocution. As earlier mentioned that I took distance to road as a proxy to distribution line. The study also finds that with increase in distance to road, there is an increase in high electrocution risk site. There is a decrease in high electrocution risk site. I also identified some of the electrocution mitigation sites based on the output from the electrocution risk mapping. The distribution line in the area, I calculated the length of distribution line by measuring by taking in account the area with electrocution risk probability higher than 2.5, 0.25. I also identified some of the road mitigation sites based on the mortality of the road accident location of the border. I found 6 segments of mitigation sites in National Highway 17 in highly fragmented southern population. The 6 segments include in Colombia, Para, Parantola, Sudarsopi, Sorapola, Apasara. The total length of the mitigation site is 7.07 kilometers. During my field work, I have seen golden langur climbing on the distribution line. I have seen golden langur climbing on the distribution line. They are found to use this aerial bunch cable to move from one tree to another. So I suggest a mitigation measure for aerial bunch cabling in those areas. Coming to the summary of my study area, I found a total vulnerable distribution area within 1,778 square kilometers in 3 distinct clusters: Dehradun and Mustafar and Dehradun Reserve Forest, western part of Manas Tiger Reserve, and highly fragmented southern population, including Soposila Wildlife Sanctuary and 8 other reserve forests and private plantation. I also found 883 square kilometers as highly suitable with occurrence probability higher than 0.05. There is a connectivity between Kakojana and Gaungao and Boragao and Gaungao, Kakojana and Nakati and Bhubaneswar. There is also a connectivity between Ranagiri and Soposila Wildlife Sanctuary for rubber plantation. The infant to adult female ratio was found high in wildlife sanctuary. This suggests the importance of protected areas in the highly fragmented southern population. I also found highest density of wood cutting in wildlife sanctuary. This might be the reason that the wildlife sanctuary is much more accessible as compared to other reserve forests, since the other reserve forests are highly are all hilly terrain which is less inaccessible to the human. High mortality due to electrocution followed by road accident, mostly in the state highway and highways were observed. High probability of electrocutions at a forest is one of the most important that need to be given priority. I also measure a total distribution line of 160.12 km for priority mitigation. Looking forward of my study, I look forward to a study on the community perception on Golden, especially focusing on southern population. Why I wanted to look on the community perception because most of the Golden population are found to settle in villages. So my study also found a corridor between the forest to villages. So I assumption that community perception study might have been Golden. That is here. With this, I would like to summarize the following. Yes. Okay, so I will come to that point. Langur electrocution has happened both in the both in the transmission pole and also in the distribution line. Uh, Langur is seen like I during my field study I have observed Langur climbing from one forest to another and sorry I will come to that point. Can you repeat your question, please? Yes, this thing I have observed in the Golden Guru southern population in rubber plantation. So I can go to the slide. So there is a state highway 714 that passing through where rubber plantation in southwest population. So there we have the state highway as well as the power line. So during my field study, I observed Golden. I attended one mortality cause electrocution. Sorry, I attend one electrocution case that happened in that area. Yes, these are parallel. So both distribution line and roads are parallel. Actually, in State Highway 14, there is already a mitigation measure that has been adopted by the NGO workers. So they have built this artificial canopy bridge, but that is only in the state highway. Most of the road accident has happened in national highway in the southeast population. So that southeast population is consists of national highway 117, which has widened to four-lane highway. So there, I assume that providing mitigation measure, providing artificial canopy bridges such as cables and as a mitigation measure in those highways is for my on my assumption is not suitable. I prefer this metal animal overpass that need to be implemented in those four-lane highways for this movement of the economy. Disha? that was too complicated for my study for this short duration of time. But in future, I'm so this is the threads that is in the fragmented forest only, not outside the fragmented forest. So in those fragmented forests, there is no power line. The power lines are only in the villages and where Kodalangur has already seen settling there. Yes, I found the corridor as a barrier. We can take. I also have given an example of here, like how mortality case has increased in 2023, but it was less in before 2023. This may be because of the widening of Western Highway. For that, I need that 29 locations data. So,
Just last question. Very good presentation. And most of the steps, the water number is by distribution lines.
yes, sir.
And most of the distribution lines do not go to the forest, they go to the leaves. That's why most of these lines came to the
Yes, sir.
This question about what other primates are found in these fragments.
Sir, rhesus macaque. There is report of slow loris, double slow loris, but since it has not been any record for the last couple of years.
And any mortality seen for those?
No.
Why is your rubber plantation actually a refugee? There are a lot of sightings in rubber plantation. Is it refugia or there is some attraction there?
Sir, I can say, I cannot say that it's a refugee. It's some kind of attractants because those rubber plantations not only consist of rubber, but it also consists of some fruiting trees such as mango, jackfruit, and also like this golden population in rubber plantation are isolated because of state highways and other like settlements in between. So there is no movement between the rubber plantation to social level century and to another village and river formation.
Any online question? Any other question? Go ahead. What state? So it just okay. So this question is by Rohit. Or India, right? It's a very thorough scientific organization. I mean, did you identify any suitable area to lead for this? Not currently harboring numbers, but where survey efforts could be targeted.
Akilan, can you please repeat the question?
Did you identify any suitable area through niche modeling, not currently harboring numbers, but where survey efforts could be targeted? What simply means that in your Excel, you have presence in some areas. Are there areas which are suitable and no golden Langur is found?
Yes, I can be bring you to my habitat suitability presentation. So I have the habitat suitability predicts some of the areas in the in the western part of Manas Tiger Reserve at the edges to be highly suitable for Kodalangu, which is like not obvious because as per my visit to those areas are mostly degraded with some grassland and scrublands. So this can also be a disadvantage to one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Ms. Sanjana Devi, whose dissertation is titled Assessing the Dog Wildlife Interface in Murumalai Tiger Reserve, India. Sanjana is interested
introduction, Nadia. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sanjana, and the title of my thesis is Assessing the Dog-Wildlife Interface in Mudumalai Tiger Reserve, Tamil Nadu. To begin with, what is the need to assess for these kind of studies, and what is the need to assess the interaction between dogs and wildlife? Dogs have been known to pose a multidimensional threat to wildlife as hyperinflated predators, as prey, as carriers of genes, that is, as in hybridizing with wild canines, and as carriers of disease such as rabies and canine distemper. However, these effects have mostly been recorded as part of studies that are focused on wildlife species rather than focused on the dogs themselves. We have little understanding of the extent of the severity of these effects, and also of the resilience of ecosystems to these effects. These studies are particularly needed in India because our country has a high density of humans as well as dogs, which often exist in close proximity to protected areas, and few studies have been done till now. My first objective was to assess the dog population status and the demographics of the dog population in my study area. The second objective was to understand human attitudes and perceptions towards dogs and dog keeping. And the third objective was to understand how dogs overlap with mammal wildlife, spatially and temporally. This is my study area. Mudumalai Tiger Reserve is situated in Tamil Nadu at the tri-junction of Kerala, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. My study areas were in these two ranges. The topmost is Masnaguri, the second one is Singara. As you can see, one village, Moya, is situated in Masnaguri and all other ranges are situated in Singara. It should be noted that vaccination and sterilization programs, the ABC programs, have been ongoing in this landscape since 1997. Coming to the study design, for my first objective, I implemented a site-re-site survey on major roads of all 5 villages. All dogs were photographed and their age, sex, the presence or absence of ear notch, skin condition score and body condition score were recorded. 4 temporal replicates were done for each village, 2 in the morning and 2 in the evening, and this was carried out from January to February. For the second objective, I conducted a structured questionnaire survey in all villages, and the aim was to get a minimum of 15 respondents per settlement. And for the third objective, I conducted camera trapping at village perimeters, maintaining a 500-meter distance between sites. This was conducted from February to April, and the effort was 15 days of camera trapping per village, with around 6 to 9 sites per village and a total number of 37 sites. I also utilized secondary data kindly provided by the Tiger Cell from the 2 relevant forest ranges, and the total number of sites in these 2 ranges was 109. This is just to show a map of how my camera trapping effort was distributed around the edges of these villages. Coming to the analysis, for the first objective, I utilized software mark to get an estimate of the population. Although this is a site-re-site study during surveys, I utilized a Huggins capture framework during analysis. One, because site-re-site allows for unmarked animals, which I did not have any of, since all dogs were uniquely identified based on the code pattern. And also, demographic and geographical closure was maintained in this sample. Final model averaging. The final model had included a heterogeneity probability number, as well as that was dependent on the particular village, as well as capture and recapture probabilities. However, in the topmost model, both were equal to each other, and the second one, they were not equal to each other. So in total, I identified 698 dogs individually through photographs, and the total estimate was 184 across all villages. The percentage of variation attributable to the model was 37%. The capture and recapture probabilities were similar within the 2 groups of the heterogeneous population. And finally, the density estimate was 317 dogs with respect to the settled area, not the entire village area. And the household to dog ratio was 2.85 to 1, while the human to dog ratio was 8.08 to 1. I also counted 155 unique dogs from camera traps. These are my survey routes for dog sampling, whereas these 155 dogs were identified from camera traps, which, as you can see, are outside the settled boundary and within the village boundary. So these are highly unlikely to have been included in these settled areas during my surveys. Assuming that these 155 extra dogs which are part of a fringe population, assuming that the total fringe population, assuming that these 155 dogs form a similar proportion of this fringe population as the dogs I identified did of the total estimate, the total population would be, by adding these two, would be 1,325. Coming to the demographic variables, these results are averaged across villages. The vast majority of dogs were unconfined. 90% were adults, and the sex ratio, as you can see, is almost 1:1, 46% males and 47% females. On average, 63% of the dogs were sterilized and vaccinated. However, when looked at sex-wise, 64% of the surveyed males were sterilized and 69% of females were sterilized. And finally, for this objective, for body and skin condition scores. For body condition, for body condition, 1 refers to emaciated, 3 is a normal body type, 5 is obese, while for skin, 0 means no skin conditions, and 3 refers to extremely severe skin conditions such as mange. As you can see, the majority of dogs fell in the normal categories from both these indicators. Finally, I also conducted a growth simulation growth simulation using Vortex 10. The initial population was said to be 1,350. Carrying capacity was set to 2,500. Reproductive rate was set to 50% of fertile females, and the litter size was set to a maximum of 4. And as you can see from the given graph, this star here refers to the current situation where there is nearly 70% sterilization of females, and this plus 10 here refers to supplementation, which is to account for people bringing in dogs from other regions. And this is set to 10. So 10 dogs are added to the population per annum. This trend does show a decrease. However, the decrease will reach 200 only in 30 years, whereas if the sterilization percentage was 90%, it would reach quite low in 10 years. Coming to the questionnaire survey, I had 112 respondents, out of which 78 were dog owners. 70% of these owners had vaccinated and sterilized their dogs. 84% of total respondents were positive about sterilization. And the major reason for dog keeping was protection. So people utilized dogs as a security system to alert them when wildlife came into their farms, or they utilized them to accompany them while herding livestock. There's a possible bias in questions relating to wildlife and dogs, since people are aware that the forest department considers dogs to be a menace. Regarding dog presence in forests, most people said that they do enter, but only with owners or livestock, while 16% said that they do enter alone occasionally, but very irregularly, or they used to do long ago and don't do so now. For dogs affecting wildlife, 15% mentioned hunting, while 27% mentioned that there was only barking or chasing and no physical harm done to wildlife. And for wildlife affecting dogs, most people mentioned lifting by leopards, while 11% mentioned some form of interaction with wildlife, but again, infrequently or long ago. Coming to the overlap between dogs and wildlife, this is just to summarize the data. So there were 528 occurrences from village data, while in the forest, where dogs were present in only 17 out of 109 sites, there were 74 independent occurrences of dogs. The village camera trapping also captured the following wild species, out of which the species in red were excluded as they had fewer than 10 occurrences. So dogs were compared with the remaining 11 wild species. So before jumping into that, I'd like to just take you through some parameters for dog alone. So single species occupancy was estimated using package unmarked, with distance from settlement performing well as a covariate, better than the null model. And as you can see, there's a sharp decline in dog occupancy probability within around until the second kilometer. So there's 0.3% occupancy at 1 kilometer, 0.09 at 2 kilometers, and 0.02 at 3 kilometers. And there's also a difference temporally. This is in the village. As you can see, there's a somewhat bimodal distribution with peaks at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. While in the forest, this shifts to a more unimodal distribution, with dogs most active at around noon. So now looking at the overlap, spatial overlap was estimated using naive occupancy with respect to dogs. So there were sites with dogs and a particular given wild species divided by the number of total number of dog sites. These are the results. These are the results obtained from that. So leopard and peafowl had almost the same spatial overlap in village and forest, while um, while for cheetal and dole, which are circled in red, they had a higher spatial overlap with dogs. They had a higher spatial overlap with dogs in the village, and all other wild species, which is 7 out of the 11 wild species, had a higher spatial overlap in the forest instead. Similarly, for temporal overlap, this was estimated using package overlap in R. All these species bounded in blue boxes had higher temporal overlap with dogs in the forest, while all other species showed higher temporal overlap at the village interface. This is just to show an example. So as you can see in the village, leopards have an extremely nocturnal pattern and therefore don't overlap with dogs much, while in the forest it shifts quite a bit and the overlap increases. This is 0.17, it's increased to 0.43. So this is just to summarize what we learned from these two graphs. Here the x-axis is spatial overlap, while the y-axis is temporal overlap, and both axes are scaled from 0 to 1. So here the top right quadrant has high overlap on both scales, and the lower left quadrant has low overlap on both scales. So as you can see, nearly all species show either a rightward or upward or both shift in their position on these graphs, which shows what I just previously mentioned, that the overlap is increasing towards the forest. The only two species that are an exception to this are cheetal and dole on both graphs. So this indicates that cheetal and dole had a leftward and downward shift, and there's higher overlap for them at the village interface. So what does this mean? One would expect that there is highest overlap close to village and lower overlap in the forest because dogs are concentrated near villages. The way I believe this can be interpreted is that closer to villages, wild animals utilize a segregation strategy and they restrict their space use um, in order to avoid disturbance, whether that is by dogs or humans or vehicles. So when this strategy is abated and they move into the forest, they are able to use much more space, and so generally they have a much wider occurrence throughout the forest. This could also be due to increased abundance, but in general, there's more possibility of finding these animals everywhere, and so therefore, dogs are more likely to encounter overlap with them everywhere in the forest. Similarly, for a temporal overlap, as we saw with leopard, most species adopt a much more nocturnal activity pattern and shift to a much more diurnal pattern when they move to the forest. So, which results in more overlap with dogs, which are of course diurnal species. Again, the exceptions to this are these two species, and this indicates that they might obtain potential shielding benefits at the interface, and so spend more time, utilize more time and space at the village interface. Coming to the discussion, so just to start from the beginning to make it a cohesive explanation. So there are a few studies that have comparable estimates of these dog population parameters. One from India is by Balsari et al. In Maharashtra in 2013, where they estimated 800 dogs in 6 villages. And so the Mudamalaya population is of course significantly higher. However, it's also older since this study had a much lower adult population, and they also had a much higher dog density in Maharashtra study area. Totten et al. Estimated dog health in Jodhpur, which is an urban area, but again there are very few comparable studies for this. These dogs, as you can see, have most of them are highly emaciated, and around the same percentage has some form of skin condition. So in that sense, Mudamalai's population is relatively healthy. The questionnaire survey, I believe, was one of the most important because it allows us to understand the vital role that dogs play in this particular landscape. The livelihoods that people adopt, which naturally will mostly be agriculture in rural areas and especially wildlife adjacent areas, affect whether they have dogs or don't have dogs. So, since people have assets to protect, which is either their crops or their livestock, dogs function as a security system for them and as an alarm system for them. This Potentially, dogs also contribute to reducing human-wildlife conflict caused by depredations of these assets since they play a role in protecting them. 20% of the total population exists at the fringe compared to 80% of the population which exists inside villages or inside settlements. So, especially since dogs are highly territorial, the vast majority of them stay inside settlements and have little opportunity to interact with wildlife. The 20% of this 20% is quite high enough since this will result to up to 10 dogs per kilometer of perimeter, which is 1 dog per 100 meters, which is still quite high. However, the entire population of 1,300 is not going to contribute to this interface. It should also be noted that although this 20% has potential for overlap with wildlife, they will not inevitably negatively interact or predate on wildlife. There are several factors listed here which can intervene, which mediate this particular relationship between dogs and wildlife, and I'll just show you some examples. So this is one camera trap photo I got, where of course a dog is chasing a cheetah. However, this is a photo taken by one of my classmates, where of course dogs and dogs are overlapping spatially and temporally, but they crossed each other they crossed each other without any kind of interaction. And as you can see, dogs are comfortable enough to engage in play behavior in the background. There's also this example where instead of dogs chasing deer, the deer is chasing the dog away. So, yes, so there's a certain amount of nuance which is required when assessing overall risk posed by dogs, and all these factors should be taken into consideration. The radius of dog species is up to 3 kilometers and is most pronounced up to 2 kilometers, as we saw from the occupancy graph. And wildlife seem to adopt segregation strategies to adjust to disturbance. So there's a certain amount of resilience that the ecosystem is exhibiting in order to adjust to these disturbance factors. However, since dhole and cheetal do not seem to do this and seem to remain benefit at the village boundaries, they are the species at highest risk of perhaps predation or disease transmission by dogs. Yeah, by dogs. And indirect disease transmission still remains a strong possibility because dogs are so plentiful and they use so much of the space, and transmission could occur, for example, by sharing water sources with wildlife or by perhaps scavenging from the same carcasses, and this should be kept in mind when designing management strategies. Nearly all species will be at risk if the population rises enough for dogs to regularly enter the forest, and so all efforts should be made to reduce this population as much as possible. Overall, the aim of dog management in this landscape should be to assess the immediate threats posed by dogs, maintain the appropriate vaccination and sterilization levels, and educate owners on dog care. The study has certain caveats. The first one is that this is a single season study, and wildlife use of village interfaces will of course vary in the wet season when water and food availability will increase in the forest. The second is that these spatiotemporal estimates are not conclusive, they are mainly indicative, and overall assessment requires a much longer term and cohesive study with much more robust data. And since dogs are not subject to the same ecological forces as wildlife, their impact cannot be really assessed in the same way that we assess the patterns of wildlife behavior or wildlife use of the landscape. And so this requires fine-scale monitoring of dogs, which I'll carry out in the coming months. And finally, it would be ideal to compare this study, to replicate the study in a protected area with no sterilization initiatives in order to assess the kind of impact that a long-term sustained animal birth control program can have in mitigating the effects of dogs on wildlife. I'd like to acknowledge all the following people for their support. These are my references in this presentation. Thank you for your attention. Right now, I didn't. That would have been ideal, but since it was secondary data and I didn't have a lot of time, I didn't calculate that. I did estimate that for the fringe population and that 20% that I mentioned, those are excluding. I've not counted dogs which are accompanied by humans or livestock.
Secondly, generally what we see for pictures of field observation is that single dogs are not as much of a threat as packs of dogs. So maybe if your camera data something allows it, maybe you could look at packs of dogs. That's just a suggestion, but probably supplement is help.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Sanjana,
Yes, sir.
it's regarding identification
Hmm.
of dogs. How much misidentification?
I've not estimated the exact rate, sir, but since I took photographs on every single survey, I had a sample set of up to 4 photographs to identify dogs from, and I also used the one is the ear notch, which ear the notch was on, and also since dogs are very territorial, I would often encounter dogs sitting in the exact same position as on previous sampling occasions. So the location where dogs were identified was a major help in identifying them, but I don't have an estimate of the error rate.
Because that is important
Important.
in your density.
Yes, sir. I'll include that.
The second question is that what you said, carrying capacity.
Yes, sir.
Basically, there are two elements to that, cultural and resource. So, what made you to make it double? Because in many other studies, largely done by A3 and there's a lot of dog literature now. That is too high for as a carrying capacity. Why choosing doubling as a logical process?
Um, I wasn't. I think I'm not maybe come across the literature which which estimates carrying capacity. I took that value because it allows for a doubling in density of dogs within settlement areas, which I believe would be the limit because uh, dogs are already very plentiful there. And when I spoke to people, they often said as a reason for supporting sterilization is that already our villages are full of dogs. We don't want more. So I assume that a doubling of this density would be the maximum that it could sustain. But I'll definitely check out this literature and come up with a good estimate.
Because there's a lot of work by A3, Chandrima and good range of people working. Epiphyte.
Yes.
So you need to check that because you listed very few studies.
Yes, sir. For
So, Sanjana, uh, why did you think that it was more useful to use mark rather than polygon search in this case for estimating density?
polygon search is a SCCR. Yeah, I thought SCCR would not be as appropriate simply because of the sheer density of dogs in that area. I mean, as far as I understand it, SCCR will utilize the maximum distance moved, right, by animals to estimate their range and density, right? But the vast majority of the dogs, that's the 80% I referred to, they hardly move. They would not move more than I would if I get them on the same street. That means they move maybe 5 or 10 meters. And so if I have 300 dogs that I utilize as SCC, I think I thought it would be quite messy. So I thought, okay, yes.
It was a nice presentation. You mentioned in your discussion that there is some sort of ecological service, or not ecological service, but some services given by dogs in terms of reducing wildlife harm.
Hmm.
That's study by one. So, did you find any evidence, ecological evidence in terms of how that service is given? Because from your data, I did not see that sort of reduction in human wildlife conflict in this particular landscape. Or is there any gradient of dog density across with respect to wildlife, which you can somehow come up with a relationship between conflict and dog density vis-a-vis wildlife?
Yes. Um, so that kind of gradient in density was not really present. At least this study was not suited to understand uh, that interaction, because the most of these dogs that perform this service are on the fringes. I will just show you that map once again. Yeah. So in this map, most of the dogs that perform that service would be present in these areas or in these areas or even outside. Mostly they will be on farms. And the dogs that I counted were all in settlement, which is, I mean, I didn't farms were not really on the routes on these routes. And so to estimate that kind of thing, one would need to employ a strategy where you go to individual farms and see how many dogs they have and estimate how much conflict is there. The reason I included in the discussion is because many people, I mean, verbally mentioned that the reason we keep dogs is to protect us, protect our assets. But no, I don't have data regarding that, but it would be interesting.
So do you also have that is any from the surveys that you have? One is the socioeconomic survey, let's say Canada.
Right. No, I hadn't anticipated this, and so I didn't include that particular question in my survey. So, yes.
Diet of the dogs are mostly dependent upon the human food provided by the humans, or there are any predation events also?
There are predation events. Like I said, like I showed that picture of dogs chasing a cheetal, and and people are aware that the forest department considers dogs to be a problem. However, I wouldn't say that dogs mostly depend on wild food. I mean, I'm making an assumption there. Of course, could be a few individuals or a few packs that do so. But as far as I've seen, most dogs are highly human dependent, and even if they do go to the forest, they will come back at night to eat food.
What proportion of the dog population was free ranging?
Yeah, free ranging was very difficult to estimate because people do not follow their dogs. They do not leash their dogs. They don't keep them inside. So just by looking at a dog which is in a forest area, I don't know if it is accompanying someone who is not visible at the moment, or if it's habitually free ranging. So that in this landscape, that proportion is not estimated. It's not possible.
Extending on the question both of them had. So one is about the cultural tolerance of people,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
The social carrying capacity for dogs.
Yes.
Have you addressed any of this in your questionnaire? Because the things such as one is food provision, second thing is about abandonment.
Right.
Ownership, but your habitat size increases, then you just keep. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you incorporate this any of your questionnaire?
I didn't anticipate this beforehand, but as regards to abandonment, um, I would guess that it's quite low. One, because people who have dogs really value them for the services they provide, and even if they abandon them, so like I mentioned, there's an NGO working in that region. They would, I mean, surrender the dog to that particular NGO. It would not be abandoned, within the village like that.
No, because people are saying we have enough dogs.
Right? Yes.
There are enough dogs there already.
Yes.
It means from somewhere there is supplementation. Or is it happening and they're not acknowledging?
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Mr. Shashank Jagdish Nagarali. His dissertation is titled Subsidized Mammals, Understanding the Mammalian Interactions with Carbon Sites Around Western Rajaji Tiger Reserve, Uttarakhand. Shashank is a keen wildlife photographer who is aspiring to be a wildlife researcher in order to better understand the various ecosystems around. Other than this, he is also interested in population ecology and the use of technology to facilitate wildlife research. All the best, Shashank.
Hello everyone. I'll be talking about my dissertation titled Subsidized Mammals, Understanding Mammalian Interactions with Garbage Sites around Western Rajaji Tiger Reserve, Uttarakhand. So let us first understand what anthropogenic food subsidies are. Anthropogenic food subsidies are food which is made available directly or indirectly to wildlife or mammals by human presence or human activities. There can be various types of anthropogenic food subsidies like garbage dumps, crop residuals, carcasses, etc. So why studying dumps is important? First of all, garbage dumps are sites where garbage, unsegregated waste is dumped irregularly, either legally or illegally. Dumps are distributed worldwide and they are predictable on spatial and temporal scales, and there is no human intentionality involved in terms of provisioning this food to wildlife. They are present in very high amounts and their effects have been observed on terrestrial biomes from producer level to the top predator levels. So do you know an average Indian generates 400 grams of waste every day, which leads to generation of 1.6 lakh tons of waste every day, which is equivalent to creating a Burj Khalifa of waste in 3 days. But only 70% of this waste is collected, while remaining is often found around roads, riverbanks, forest areas, and fringes of the villages. So when such garbage sites are found around protected areas or wildlife habitats, they may become accessible to wildlife, leading to various consequences like ingestion of harmful waste by animals, zoonosis, or at times conflict. So the first report I encountered was from Alberta, Canada, where American black bears were found to be feeding at these sites and were tolerant to other individual bears and humans in 1968. So far the studies involve documenting effects of anthropogenic food subsidies on individual levels, population level, community levels. So various studies I have encountered were from coming regarding vultures, kelp gulls, white storks, and interactions between wolves and wild prey and carrions, polar bears and ducks, elephants and garbage, and also ravens and desert tortoises. From the handful studies from India, I found association of red foxes, Asian elephants, striped hyenas, sloth bear, black kites, and other uh, mammalian and bird community from western Himalayas. And I also found various grey literature which documented presence of various species at similar sites. So there has been large knowledge gap in understanding which community visit these sites and why they visit these sites. So I developed my objectives and questions. So the first objective is to compare mammalian visitations at the garbage site, in which I try to answer which community of mammals visit this garbage sites more. And the second objective was to investigate the influence of various variables on the visitations of the mammalian species. And I will try to answer that why specific sites are visited by mammals. The third objective is to investigate mammalian co-occurrences with respect to humans, livestock, free-range dogs, and cats at the garbage site, as these are sites which are commonly visited by all of this. For the study, I selected western part of Rajasthan as my study area, which has overall area of 572 square kilometer with two major cities, Dehradun and Haridwar, where Haridwar is a tourism hub. The road network is all found all across the boundary of the park, and there's varied mammalian community, which will benefit me to compare visitations of mammalian community. So the hypothesis for the first objective was that synanthropes like wild pigs, rhesus macaque, jackals, nilgai, which are benefited by humans and thrive in human-dominated or semi-urban landscape, may visit these garbage sites, followed by omnivores from the forest, carnivores from the forest, and herbivores from the forest. So for this, I started locating this garbage site by laying a 4 square kilometer grid all around the boundary of the protected area till 4 kilometers beyond. And in this 72 grids, I surveyed twice for locating garbage sites where regularly garbage was dumped. And in this survey, I found out 21 sites, out of which 10 sites were selected based on their product composition, distance from protected area, distance from human infrastructure, size in terms of perimeter, and camera safety. This is the pictorial representation of the various garbage sites I had in my study based on their composition. So I installed camera traps at the garbage site. 13 infrared camera traps were installed at the garbage site based on the signs or animal trails present at or around the garbage site. This More cameras were installed at sites wherever required. Camera trapping session was from January 2024 to March 2024, yielding a total camera trap effort at the garbage site of 576 trap nights. So I processed the camera trap data using mega detector and SPSec packages from Python. Then I processed this data to get relative abundances of each species using the given formula. A total of 16 species at the garbage site was found, and wild species were found, and out of which, as contradicted to our hypothesis, sambar, porcupine, and spotted deer were the most visiting species, followed by two of the synanthropes, and then other omnivores, carnivores from the protected area. I also plotted a distribution map of a species distribution map across the garbage site around the protected area, where we can see that animals have showed specific visitations towards the garbage sites. On the southwestern boundary, there are more visitation by small Indian civet, jackal, and nilgai, while on the northern boundary, there is lot of representation of rhesus macaque in pink color and specific visitations by sambar and spotted deer at the respective sites. So, to look at this specificity towards vegetation, I come to my objective two to investigate the effect of influence of variables on the vegetations of species, and then looked at effects of various variables like distance of garbage site from protected area, size of the garbage dumps, composition of the garbage dump, distance between garbage site and human infrastructure, this difference in NDVI between garbage site and nearest protected area, relative abundances of humans, dogs, cats, and livestock at the garbage site, distance of garbage site from the nearest water body, and relative abundances of species in the adjacent protected area. So for this, distance of garbage site from protected area, human infrastructure, and water body was calculated using ArcGIS Pro, and the data on relative abundances of humans, dogs, cats, and livestock at the garbage site was coming from the camera data. I also quantified the size of the garbage site in terms of perimeter, and then I recorded composition of various categories listed below with by placing 1 meter square quadrants, which was further divided into 25 by 25 centimeter subsets. To quantify the relative abundances of the species within the protected area, I placed camera traps within the protected area 5 kilometers away from the garbage site, in which camera traps were placed based on where there were high signs of animals. To look at the NDVI difference, I laid a buffer of 100 meters around the garbage site and camera trap locations within the protected area. For protected area NDVI values, I averaged out the values and then took a difference between the NDVI values of garbage site and protected area. I looked at the effect. I evaluated the effect of relative abundances of the species from protected area on the relative abundances at the garbage site of the specific species using Spearman correlation test. Then effect of various other variables were also analyzed using analysis of similarities on the community matrix of mammals visiting this garbage site. I divided the mammalian community into two types, forest dwelling and synanthropes, as they would respond to these variables differently. And also the variables for this analysis were categorized based on the ecological inferences. So there was no significant effect of relative abundances of adjacent protected area found on the vegetations of mammals at the garbage site, which suggests that it's not the abundance within the protected area which push them outside the protected area at the garbage site, but it's the garbage site which attracts them. So to look at the effects of various variables related to from the garbage site perspective, I did ANOSIM, and for 5 variables I found significant effect on the various and on the both communities. Distance from the protected area had a significant effect on both of the communities. Though for forest dwelling species there was not much of variation, but still there was a significant effect. The effect of size of the garbage site couldn't be really evaluated because of there were very less variations of size in the recorded data. While for presence of humans, livestock, dogs, and cats at the garbage site, forest dwelling species tend to avoid visiting garbage sites with high human, livestock, dogs, and cats presence. Synanthropes preferred vegetation cover around the garbage site, which was given significant statistically by Anderson results, and they also tend to prefer high amounts of food waste in the garbage site, which suggests that their dependency on such food waste at the garbage site. Other variables like distance to water, plastic, amounts of plastic in the garbage, religious offerings, food wrappers and disposables didn't have any significant effect on visitations of mammalian community. But also, distance to human infrastructure did not have any significant effect on the mammalian community visiting at this site, suggesting that mammals were tolerant to human infrastructure. Coming to our third objective, I hypothesize that there will be a negative influence of humans, livestock, dogs and cats on synanthropes and forest dwelling species, except for rhesus macaque, as rhesus macaque have a different mode of acquiring food via direct interface with humans. So for this I use the probabilistic models of co-occurrences given by which for which I converted a matrix into site event to species presence access matrix, where a site event is if a species is present at a site for a if, if a species is if a species is present at a site for a given R frame, then yes. So the results were there were a lot of negative co-occurrences of wild mammals with respect to human, vehicle, dog, buffalo, cow, and we've also apart from that we also found that there were significant positive co-occurrences between wild pairs like barking deer, spotted deer hare, sambar porcupine, which sambar porcupine were found to be visiting this site irrespective of their composition, and they were found to be foraging from the camera data as well. Clumped resources like garbage site may facilitate co-occurrences of two or more species belonging to the same trophic level.
Tell everybody online should be mute.
So yes, uh, clumped resources like garbage site may force two or more species from the same trophic level to co-occur at the site and exploit these sites. From the quantification of composition of the garbage site, I found that the possible risk for wildlife can be plastic ingestion or ingestion of food wrappers, and also zoonosis can be a possible risk from the various types of materials like poultry, sanitary waste, food waste, others present in the garbage site. While the study was going on, there were a lot many negative interactions found where Asian elephants were found to be damaging human property at a garbage site. There were tolerance of sambar populations found to humans and human infrastructure far away from the protected area. So I conclude that herbivores from the forest were the most visiting species, followed by the synanthropes, carnivores, and omnivores. Then mammals visited this garbage site irrespective of their abundances within the protected area, which tells that the abundances within the protected area don't push them out, but it's the garbage site which attracts them. Forest dwelling species requires specific garbage sites like sites which are closer to their habitats and also which have lesser anthropogenic activities, while synanthropes require more vegetation cover around the garbage site and higher food amounts in the garbage site. Mammals were also found to be tolerant to human infrastructures. Lastly, clumped resources like garbage site can facilitate co-occurrences of two or more species from the same trophic level. These were my references for the study. I would like to thank all of those people. Thank you.
How many questions?
What are the two closest carnivore species competitor which you found most often on these sites?
So carnivore species. Rajaji has only two proper carnivores like leopard and tiger. Tigers then found to be with the small carnivores. Uh, so I can take you to this graph. Yes, yes. Uh, so there was not significant visitations by small carnivores at the garbage site. Small carnivores like small Indian civet, palm civets, like they didn't have much of visitations. That's why that effect I couldn't really like confidently tell about.
It's interesting. So you basically not having much of meat.
Yes, sir. Mostly the sites were around Haridwar and also the southern boundary of the protected area, which didn't give much of contribution to the category as poultry and carcass discards in the garbage site.
And you don't have any site village dump sites
So
where
village dumps
direct
were
dump
there.
sites.
So village sites were there, but there were not much of macaque presence. Macaque presence was found at sites
No carcass dumping anyway.
no, sir, not at such.
Any online question?
Yes.
So, next topic. So, why do you use NDVI as one of the variables? And the second question is, did you uh, measure the distance to the adjacent garbage site?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, the first one is about NDVI, and the second one is, did you use the distance to the adjacent garbage site as one of your variables?
For NDVI, I laid a buffer of 100 meters around the garbage site, which suggested that if there is more vegetation cover, then animals around, if there is more vegetation cover around the garbage site, animals would prefer such sites more as compared to other sites. So, uh, Sinanthropes showed some specificity towards such sites, which may because they thrive in such human-dominated and semi-urban landscape, which basically NDY difference is giving vegetation cover at the garbage site and how vegetation cover influences Sinanthrop's specificity towards garbage site. Uh,
Second question
yes,
is
yes.
about the distance to the adjacent garbage site, because it's about the distribution of garbage sites, right? If you have multiple garbage sites in an area, or you have very solitary garbage sites, so you use that as one of the variables.
I didn't use that one as one of the variables. I selected. There were many garbage sites around the like in the neighboring areas, but I selected garbage sites which were like uh, good for my data set to account for most of the
Yeah,
variations.
distance here you have when you're putting more any
I
question?
mean, of course, you picked those, but the influence of adjacent, so the distance, like how you did distance to your PA, distance to your settlement, the distance to the adjacent garbage site. No comment?
No, I haven't recorded that. If it
If there are
will-
questions, read it. Go ahead. Is it what you're saying? Read the question and then say I'm asking.
Prashant,
Yes,
one
sir.
question. Just so I mean, one may say that garbage sites are pretty good for wildlife. So how do you respond to that?
Sir,
Considering that there's such a lot of wildlife around garbage sites. Just
So there have been various positive effects of garbage site are documented on mammals across the globe, like increasing in population of mammals or body condition. Garbage sites leading to better body conditions, but at the end, on community level or ecosystem level, they might have some or the other negative impacts. So at the end, I would suggest that subsidies like garbage sites will be a good food resource or site to visit. I think.
so I wanted your thoughts on that. Just the correlation between that simply points out that the ultimate food web consequences or the cascading consequences are. What you're saying makes sense. Yeah.
Shashank, Shashank, good job. Did you come up with an explanation of why Sinan's showed a positive, motivation cover showed a positive influence for Sinan's and not for forest ordinary species as human itself?
So for forest dwelling species, they might come and go back to the protected area. While for synanthropes, they might stay around the garbage site so that like their dependency can be on protected area as well as on garbage site. So they might synanthropes might not go back to the protected area while stay around the garbage site. So that's my explanation for the vegetation cover.
Body size and voice should have added correlation.
How many of your this garbage site is located in the water bodies? So have you assessed is it the water bodies which is attracting these mammals outside the protected area or the actually garbage site which is attracting?
Uh,
Because they might come for the water and simultaneously from visiting these places.
So we also took that variable into consideration, and water was present all across the study area while that time frame when we did the study. So we didn't find any effect of presence of water body in the proximity of the garbage site having any effect on mammalian visitations. Yes, yes,
I just
yes.
suggested to know the RA or hyenas because I didn't see any mention of hyenas across. So, what did you find there?
Yes, ma'am. There were very few visitations by hyena, one or two visitations by striped hyena, that too around the northern.
No, no,
So,
in the
pro-
protected area, what was the RAI? Like, was it was good?
no, ma'am. It was comparatively low, so it was like based on availability of the species within the protected area. For correct. Yes.
That's one by shooting Banerjee. I was wondering what was the importance of NDA as a variable. Can you please elaborate a bit? Thank you.
Thank you, Shashank. That was the last set of presentations. There's two more left after the tea break. So please come back immediately. We will carry your lecture file.
Shilpa is a nature enthusiast with a keen interest in studying small mammals and lesser-known species, especially the impact of humans on these animals. So, Shilpa, over to you and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone.
Bye.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start my presentation with a short background about the effect of land use change on biodiversity. During the past few decades, humans have modified the global environment to meet the requirements and consequently altered the ecology of many wild animals. So, increasing demand for the food production has led to the conversion of natural forests to agriculture and plantation. The Western Ghats of India have witnessed a significant increase in the monoculture plantations of tea, coffee, cardamom, etc. Even though we all know that the plantation reduces the biodiversity, there are some evidences which suggest that the plantation can still serve as an important habitat for many wild animals by providing mechanisms such as increased food availability, refuge from predators, and shelter. So, for example, so many studies have reported many wildlife animals using agriculture and plantation outside the protected area. For example, gaur, elephant, seaweed, those have been reported from coffee and tea plantation in Western Ghats, and other animals like black buck, nilgai are invading the croplands and doing the crop damage. In recent years, studies have also reported that the giant squirrels such as Malabar giant squirrel and Grizzled giant squirrel are also venturing into the farmlands and causing the crop damage. With this background, I come to my thesis titled Effect of Land Use Change on the Habitat and Abundance of Grizzled Giant Squirrel in and around Srivilliputtur Megamalai Tiger Reserve. So, before coming to my study species, I would like to give a brief introduction about the giant squirrels of India. So, giant squirrels are diurnal in nature and solitary, play an important role in seed dispersal. Of the four giant squirrels found globally, India is home for three. They are Malabar giant squirrel distributed in the peninsular India, uh, black giant squirrel distributed in the northeastern part of India, and grizzled giant squirrel, which is the smallest among the giant squirrels found in Sri Lanka and India. In India, the grizzled squirrel is found as an isolated population inhabiting the rain-shadow regions of Western Ghats in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka. So the nest of the squirrels are called as drays, which are built by using leaves and twigs. So grizzled giant squirrel can build drays more than 2 to 3 drays within their home range. So it is important to study grizzled giant squirrels as there are limited studies are conducted on ecology and response to disturbance. And the species is vulnerable to threats such as hunting, hybridization, habitat loss, fragmentation, and retaliatory killing. And it is also known to be a conflict with the farmers. The existing literature has looked into a population density within the protected area, activity patterns, food habit, distribution, and hybridization with the Malabar giant squirrel. Still, it has a lot of research gaps, which which are like population status outside protected area, response to different human modified landscapes, seasonal movement across different habitats, and race site selection across different land use types, and the extent of crop depredation. With this knowledge gap, I have my objectives. My objective one is to compare the density of resurgent squirrel and rays in relation to the habitat types across winter and summer season. Under this objective, I address two questions. What is the population density of squirrel and rays across different habitat types? The second question is, do the population density of squirrels vary across the seasons in different habitats? And second objective is to understand what are the factors influencing the dray site selection in natural and modified question. The third objective is to quantify the extent of crop depredation driven by grizzled giant squirrel and consequent perception of the farmers, and answer the following question. Study area: the Srivilliputtur Wildlife Sanctuary, which is now notified as the Srivilliputtur Megamalai Tiger Reserve, encompasses a diverse landscape ranging from evergreen forest to scrub jungle. Apart from the protected area, my study area also falls in outside the protected area and within the eco-sensitive zone.
which mainly consists of plantation of mango, tamarind and coconut. So this is a video where I'll show how I selected my intensive study area. My intensive study area was selected based on the dense cultivation of plantations within eco-sensitive zone, and the adjacent protected area was considered for the survey. Study design. To understand the effect of land use change, I conducted a land use land cover analysis for the year 1993 and 2023 within the eco-sensitive zone to understand the extent of plantation in last 30 years. For the surveying, the existing transect bits and the patrolling tracks were delimited as a line transects in protected area, and deciduous forest and riparian forest were considered. Outside the protected area, the line transects of varied length depending on the length of the plantations were placed at a distance of 250 meters from each transect in three different plantation types. Those are coconut plantation, mango plantation, and mixed plantation. All these transects were replicated 4 times during the study period and were divided into two distinct seasons, that are winter season, December and January, and summer season as February, March, and April. Sampling effort. This data shows the sampling effort in different habitat types, where I achieved 60-kilometer total effort in plantation and 67-kilometer effort in protected area. Total effort was 127 kilometer. So the change prediction analysis for 1993 and 2023 was analyzed using Google Earth Engine and ArcGIS Pro, where I used Landsat 5 image for 1993 and I used Landsat 8 for 2023 with a 30 by 30 meter resolution. The following land use classifications were done, which shows that there is an increasing trend in water and agriculture, whereas a decreasing trend in the forest and barren land. Sampling method for density estimation. All the squirrels encountered on the line transects were recorded, and the drays were recorded only once during the entire study period. The following parameters were noted. The surveys were conducted in the morning hours, coinciding with the peak activity of the squirrel. And the data was analyzed in the R pack. The density of the squirrels and drays was analyzed in the R programming using distance package. This table clearly shows, this is the sightings of squirrels and drays. This table clearly shows that the mixed plantation has high number of sightings, whereas in protected area, deciduous forest has more number of sightings. The density of squirrels and drays were estimated using R program using distance package, and density of for density of squirrels, half normal was the best fit model, whereas for density of drays, half hazard rate was the best fit model. It shows that the density of squirrels and drays are highest in mixed plantations because it offers both foraging and nesting place, as it forages on the coconut trees and nests on the other and utilizes other trees for nesting. This is the image. Density of squirrels were both higher in mixed plantations, and density of squirrels was higher in the coconut plantation, but the density of drays were comparatively lower. It clearly shows that the squirrel was using the coconut plantation for foraging, and coconut trees were not suitable for the dray construction. Whereas in the mango plantation, as there was no mango fruiting this year, the density of both squirrels and drays were relatively less. So coming to the protected area, the density of squirrels, density of squirrels in the protected area more or less remained similar between the deciduous forest and riparian forest, whereas the density of drays were higher in the deciduous forest. The seasonal variation of density shows the increased density in the winter season, increased density in the winter season, it could be the fact that the larger plantation interspersed with a smaller plantation of fruits such as jackfruit, guava, and sapotas, which were fruiting during the summer season, were utilized by the squirrels during that time period. So coming to the density within the plantations, density of squirrels were higher in mixed plantation in the winter season, and whereas the density of squirrels were higher in the coconut plantation in the summer season. We can see a little bit increasing trend in the density of squirrels in the mango plantation, because of there was some farms where the mango fruiting was happening. Sampling method. So, like to understand the dray site selection, 50% of the drays were randomly, the 50% of drays encountered on the line transits were randomly sampled. The 10 nearest tree around the dray trees were also considered for the control, and the following parameters were noted. Irrespective of whether the dray is abandoned or the active, the dray was considered. To understand the dray site selection, I ran a generalized linear model for independently for protected area and plantation, because factors affecting might differ in these both landscapes. So the model shows that the best fit model shows that the tree height and the canopy connectivity have a significant influence on the dray site selection, as the height plays an important role in all the arboreal species as it provides the protection, whereas the canopy connectivity facilitates the easier movement of squirrels from one tree to another tree. So within the protected area, tamarind trees was preferred more than the other trees, more than the other trees. So in addition with the GLM, I did the availability and use for the only parameters which were showed significant in the GLM, and it shows that height more than the 13 meters is preferred, and the canopy connectivity more than 75% is preferred. Same data analysis was done for the dray site selection plantation, where it shows the crown width and the number of branches significantly influences the dray site selection. The crown width is significant because it connects the one tree to another tree and facilitates the easier movement of squirrels within the plantation. And number of branches is showed as a significant effect because of the increased number of coconut trees in the plantations, which were not suitable for the dray construction. And within the plantation, 23 drays were found on the mango trees, which shows a high affinity towards the mango tree. So the result of the availability and use shows that crown width more than 9 meters is preferred, and the number of branches more than 2 are preferred. So to gauge the farmers' perception, I conducted a structured questionnaire surveys in 50 farms in different plantation types, and 98 farmers reported the presence of grizzled giant squirrels in their farm. In addition to this, squirrels, farmers also reported bats, elephants, goats, monkeys, and wild pig causing damage in their farms. Even though it is known that rats also cause the coconut damage, which shows the similar feeding signs, but the farmers didn't report any crop depredation happen from this rat. So farmers' perception towards the squirrel sighting in the farm is 93% of the farmers reported seeing squirrels in the farms multiple times in a day, and 51% of the farmers reported that they started seeing squirrels in the farms in last more than 15 years. Farmers' perception toward the economics loss, the farmers reported more that the crop depredation happens frequently in their farms, and majority of the farmers reported that the squirrels damages 10 to 50 coconuts per day in their farms. And regarding the economic loss, 41% of the farmers reported to have more than 20,000 rupees of losses per year. So these are the images which shows the crop depredation done by the grizzled giant squirrel. It's like it can show the guava, jackfruit, and sapota. To understand the extent of crop depredation, I implemented 10 experimental plots of 50 by 50 meter in 3 different plantations. Those are king coconut plantation and normal coconut plantation and mixed coconut plantation, mixed plantations. And these sites were cleared and monitored throughout the study period. The depredation rate was calculated by the below mentioned formula. The depredation rate was found to be higher in the king coconut because it can be the reason because the king coconut variety has a very soft shell, and it's found that the overall mean predation rate was 3 coconuts damaged per tree per year. So for easy understanding, the farm owner farm owner of 1 acre land faces economic loss of 3,000 rupees per year, which makes it clear that the farmer's perception towards economic loss is exaggerated. Conclusion. So the land around the protected area has underwent a significant conversion to the plantations, which has led to the land canopy connectivity within plantation and protected area, which has facilitated the squirrels to venture into the farmlands. And because of the increased food resources, the density of the squirrels are also increased, which also resulted in causing the conflict with the farmers. And overall, farmers has overall negative perception and the economic losses were exaggerated. Coming towards the dray site selection, within the protected area, tree height and the canopy connectivity played the important role, influence the dray site selection, whereas in plantation, crown width and the number of branches influences the dray site selection. Management implication, as from this results, it is known that the majority of the population resides outside the protected area. Community-based engagement for the long-term conservation outside the protected area is required. Financial incentives and compensation for the crop damage can be done. And maintaining and restoring the critical habitats within the protected area is necessary. And as also it is known that it has more density outside protected area, the eco-sensitive zone can be designated as other effective area-based conservation measures or as a community reserve. I would like to thank these following people.
Just want to know about what has changed in the landscape in last couple of decades, because this plantation thing is pretty recent.
But
they were there, but
yeah,
they become much more now.
yes.
So what is changing that people are opting for plantation so much? In 2-3 decades, there's a lot of plantation.
Yeah, like you mean like there are plantation, why not the agricultural fields, right?
Right.
So initially people started with agriculture. As they started facing a loss, they started shifted towards the plantations, which are like which don't require more maintenance and all. And
Losses because of not squirrel, other
not
animals.
other animals can be. This might be the reason, I think. Even during my questionnaire survey, I asked people like in which year they were established the plantations. People said that it's 1980 period. Earlier it was agriculture field, then they shifted towards the plantation, and more large number of people were taken farms on lease. They didn't know what happened historically.
That's why I'm asking. The leasing and
Leasing happened.
money to people coming in.
Yeah.
And also the water increase is a lot of
I think
small dams have
dams.
also come in.
Dams are-
Yeah.
Hi, Grizzled. I have two questions. Firstly, how do you measure connectivity? That is not clear in your
Oh yeah. Yes. I categorized as a high, medium, and low categories and converted into numerical as 25%, 50%, and 75%. And same I did with the canopy connectivity also.
One of your suggestions.
Just one more.
No, we can add more.
Secondly, I believe youth editors would be.
Yes.
So, do you think that would affect
So, literature suggested that they have seen some raptors predating on the squirrels, but during my study period, I didn't come across any instances of aerial predators predating on the squirrel or damaging the nest.
Okay, so just a suggestion, if you could look at, like you see the tree height, which is from the ground up,
Yeah.
if you could see how down from the top, if you have that data.
Actually, I plotted the regression of dray height and the tree height, which shows that the dray height increases with the height of the tree. So basically, when the tree is at the 12 meters, the dray will be at around 10 to 11 meters. So it prefers like tall trees and little bit of yes, just
What's the
one.
minimum height of it? Just minimum height.
So minimum height can be 6 meters.
Shilpa, I'm just curious about the economics of coconut farming over there, which you showed. The loss that you showed was 3,000 which you estimated after your experimentation.
Yeah.
So, just do you have any idea of how much one would make out of, let's say, 1 acre of land, and in terms of how that loss is
Okay.
compensated? Because a farmer is quite smart in that
I
they,
know.
they know that this much of loss will whatever you do. So, what is the economics basically in terms of?
So you mean what is the proportion of loss, right?
Yeah, in terms of the
There.
ultimate, commercial aspect.
This I tried to get the answer from the questionnaire survey, but farmers didn't have a exact profit for like it's difficult to get it for 1 acre. People say depending on the size of their land. So I don't know exactly what is the
How
proportion.
many coconut one can harvest?
So if it
I'm,
one tree,
I'm not asking
yeah.
question, but one you can work it out later.
So farmers used to say one tree of coconut will give thousand
So something
coconuts in
like
a
that
year.
you can work backward. That will answer this question. The coconut cost is so much, so that will work out.
Yes,
I'm not
I understand.
So basically, one tree produces this much. How many trees are there?
I have the answer for how many coconuts are produced from one tree in 1 year. So farmers used to say approximately 1,000 coconuts from one tree. Thousand,
The loss
thousand
is
more I
hardly,
think. Like,
the point I'm trying to make is the loss that you estimated could be very, very negligible
yes.
in terms of the reputation that seems to show that this is very high, this is very low. When in fact, if you actually account for the economics of the loss and the profit that they make, this is the risk that a farmer may be willing to take.
Yes.
If these risks are much more, then it creates a conflict. That's why I was asking that question.
I understand. And also, like in few farms there were a lot of squirrels, and in few farms there were not, very less number of squirrels. So it actually depends on how much canopy connectivity is there within the farm.
So one of the measures is to make sure the farm is not contaminated.
Yeah, they should more do monoculture plantation instead of mixed plantations and all.
So one question, Shilpa. One of your suggestions was that you change the habitat condition and restore within. That is coming from what perspective of yours? From data or you just thought of it? Like what that means?
So, literature suggests that this grizzled giant squirrel is a riparian species, but also seen its distribution in the deciduous forest. So it feeds more on tamarind trees and so many trees are there. So it could be important to just restore those habitats and critical habitats where we can prevent the future.
What I mean, you already worked in that area. Do you really think restoration is an issue?
It may not be ideally possible. Right?
Okay, can you just go back to your WLC map, please? Okay, so which is plantation in this? Is
So actually,
agriculture plantation?
yeah, agriculture, I combine the agriculture and plantation together as agriculture.
Right. Because we really don't know how much plantation has increased because the thrust is on plantation.
Yes,
But we really don't have
class
the
is on
exact
agriculture.
Right. Maybe you should look at this because
Ah.
the entire study is based on forest versus plantation, right?
Yeah, as this was not my main objective, I made this for the visual interpretation that the extent of plantation has increased in past 30 years.
Yeah, but we really don't know how much it has increased.
Yes.
A lot of people are coming from city and buying things.
Yeah, a lot of politicians are also there.
And it's also towards change towards cash crops, which is more profitable. Another question. We go back to your density of drainage items. Drainage densities. So in your deciduous forest, look at the proportionality between the density of squirrels and the density of trees. why do you think there's such a 14 and 289?
Because only in the deciduous forest you mean,
Yeah,
right?
the proportionality is quite high. 14 density and 200.
Yeah, this could be the reason because I was considering all the trees, irrespective of whether it is active or abandoned tree. That might be the one reason. Apart from that, I don't know. Maybe there was less number of squirrel sightings in the trees, sorry, in the deciduous forest.
Right. Because 73, 400 and 14 to 1. About the farms, the questionnaire that you did,
Yeah.
you said 50 farms you interviewed.
Yes.
This is what, out of how many farms? And what kind of farms are these?
These were basically plantations of coconut, mango, and mixed
And what
plantations.
is it, how did you
Proportion. So, because these are plantations, right? There are not many human habitations. The people won't settle there. So, people won't settle there. Usually, I used to take the questionnaire surveys from whoever is available in that farm. I surveyed more farms for my density estimation, like more than 100, but I couldn't survey more farmers.
Thank you so much, Shilpa. Now, bringing us one line of plants, I call upon Mr. Ramana, who is going to talk about the assessment of anthropogenic disturbance on epiphytes in the castings of Meghalaya. Neil is passionate to learn about the intricate links that exist between different plant species and their habitats, and she wants to use this interest to further explore the issues of plant taxonomy and plant community culture. Over to you, all the best.
Thank you, Manas, for the introduction, and I thank you everyone for being here. The title of my presentation is Assessing the Effect of Anthropogenic Disturbance on Epiphytes in Khasi Hills of Meghalaya. We all know that anthropogenic pressure is one of the factors that are affecting the forest ecosystem across the globe. The forest ecosystem are degrading day by day, and one of the group of plants that are getting affected by anthropogenic disturbance are epiphytes. Epiphytes come from the Greek word epi and phytos, which means upon. Epi means upon and phyte means plants. This definition was first given by Marble in around 208 years ago. It was in French, but it got translated. Epiphytes are plants that grows on other plants for support. They take nutrients and other they take nutrients from the atmosphere, and epiphytes are divided into two types: hemi-epiphytes and hollow-epiphytes. Hemi-epiphytes are those epiphytes that spends half of their life cycle on the tree, and then the other half, when they mature, they extend their roots to the ground. Hollow epiphytes are true epiphytes. The example of hollow epiphytes are orchids. Hemi-epiphytes are figs. Now, why epiphytes are important? Because they act as nutrient cycler, which when they die, since they absorb nutrients from the environment, they are released back into the atmosphere when they decompose. So they also act as a microhabitat for certain species in canopy trees. They also act as syndicator species because they, since they are sensitive to changes in environmental conditions, the health of the forest can be determined with the presence and absence of epiphytes. Globally, there has been many studies um, uh, regarding anthropogenic disturbance across the globe. Basically, they focus on how deforestation, habitat fragmentation, pollution, and climate change, how it has changed the abundance of epiphytes. In India, Western Ghats is one of the biogeographical zones that has been largely studied based for anthropogenic disturbance. There are very little studies in the northeast. In Meghalaya, there is one particular study which talks about how anthropogenic disturbance is affecting the vascular epiphytes, but it's focused mainly on these sacred groups. Therefore, the knowledge gap is that there is no studies on epiphytes across different land use types. With this, I have come up with three objectives. The first one is to study species richness and abundance of epiphytes across different land use types. The second is to understand the variation in species composition across the different land use types. The third is to investigate the disturbance variables that underlie the species variation, uh, in species composition. With that, for each objective, I have three questions. Do the different land use type exhibit different species richness? Is there any variation in species composition across different land use types? And what are these factors that are affecting the diversity of epiphytes? Coming to my study area, the picture which is vertical here on the left, the forest which is showing here is one of the study site, one of my study site, and the plains, which is Meghalaya, sorry, and the plains showing is Bangladesh. So my study area is is a border between India and Bangladesh. I have chosen two community reserves, Thamthara and Rinod, and I have selected three land use types, which is village forest, reserve forest, and private forest. The site selection for these forests is based on the management they hold. A village forest will be managed by a Sirdar or a headman. The reserve forest is managed by State Forest Department, and private forest is managed by an individual. To collect data for trees, plot-based vegetation sampling has been followed. Each plot is 200 meters apart from each other. The circular plot of 10-meter radius has been used, and the number of sampling efforts has been used with the help of species accumulation curve. For trees, the identity of the tree, the height of the tree has been used with the help of range finder. Then the girth of the tree of above 10 centimeter has been recorded. So the canopy of the tree has been recorded with the help of a tensiometer, and which 5 readings in each plot has been recorded. To collect data for disturbance, lopping is the only variable that I have taken for the anthropogenic disturbance, and the scale of lopping has been put from a scale of 0 to 4. To collect data for epiphytes, I have divided the tree into four zones based on the Johansson's zonation. Host plant, that is the tree, it has been noted. The species identity of the epiphyte and the zone of occurrence of epiphytes has also been recorded. Observations have been made with the help of binoculars and photographs. Coming to the analytical methods to check species richness estimation, sample-based rarefaction curve, non-parametric cow estimator, and rank abundance curve were used to check the species composition in all different land types. NMDS has been used. The results for objective 1. These curves is showing an increased trend of across different land use types, which means that they are not reaching an asymptote. And it means that more sampling efforts are still needed to be laid. And this is the same with the species accumulation curve of epiphytes across land use types. The sample-based rarefaction curve across different land use types also shows a similar trend, but it gives an estimate of how many samples are needed to be laid if my sampling efforts are increased. with this, to test the species richness, cow estimator is used, in which when we look at the observed species richness in private forest, which is 37, cow estimator is showing that 47.74 number of species will be species richness will be more if sampling efforts is increased. And then cow estimator standard error is showing 7.28, which means that there are many common species. But when we compare it with reserve forest, which is 24.5, cow estimator standard error is showing that it's very varied, too much variation, which means that there are many singletons and doubletons. Singletons are species that occurs only one, and doubletons are the species that are occurring only twice. The relative abundance of epiphytes is showing that the first rank, second, third, and so on, the one which are in the first rank are actually more abundant or more common than the ones that are in ranking 15. So the ones which are ranking 15 and above, they are the rare species. Reserve forest here is showing that there is an equal number of abundance of species, therefore it's more even. Looking at the abundance of epiphytes with respect to host trees, Mycelia champaka has more number of epiphytes, even though it shows a negative value for the number of trees, which means that there are very less number of trees of Mycelia champaka, but has more epiphytes. But when we compare with Bohemia, Purpurea, and Shimawali char, they have more abundance of trees, but less epiphytes. This could be the one reason could be that these species have different bark characteristics. Abundance of epiphytes across zones of occurrence is shown that in private forests, that is lower trunk and upper trunk is occupied by, it's more abundant when we compare with the other land use types. Now the abundance of ferns across zones is showing that reserve forests harbors more ferns because the understory is more dense, which serve as a microhabitat for particular species. This species is Pyrosia. The abundance of orchids across zones is showing that village forest has more orchid number because physiologically orchids they require more sunlight for growth and also for flowering. So this could be one of the reasons. Abundance of hemiepiphytes across zones of occurrence is more in private forests and village forests. This reason could be that since there is one species that people there, even though it grew widely, they conserve that species that is Piper longum. It has a very highly commercial valued species, which is 800 to 1000 rupees per kilo. That's why it's more abundant. Now, the unique species seen across different land use types for ferns, there are no unique species of ferns in village forests. It doesn't mean that there is no fern at all, but it's just showing that the fern in village forests are shared across different land use types. Hemiepiphytes are more unique species, have more unique species in village forests, and then for orchids, 8 orchids are unique only in reserve forest. For objective 2, the results are to check the variation in species composition across land use type. NNDS was used. So private forests and village forests is showing that they are a subset of a reserve forest. Now, reserve forest is this big ellipse here, which is green. It's showing that the outliers are the rare species. This can be answered again from cow estimator that there are many singletons and doubletons in that particular land use types. To answer the objectives for objective 3 is that is to understand the variables of the lumping, the disturbance variables and other variables that are affecting the epiphytes. Average lumping is almost the same in all land use type. And the GH of the tree is showing that in private forest it's more. The reason is that the private forest has more plantation. One of the reasons is that another reason is that the stem density will be more in private forest when we compare to reserve forest and village forest. The average height is again more in private forest because the average height of these plantation it's around 30 to 35 meters compared to reserve and village forest. The slope across different land use types is more in is high sorry in high is high in reserve forest compared to village forest and private forest. Reserve forest has higher slope because most of these areas are inaccessible, even though we don't know yet if they harvest more species of epiphytes, but they are inaccessible. So the canopy cover of this canopy cover is showing that private forest has more coverage compared to reserve forest and village forest. The elevation is also showing that the reserve forest will have more elevation compared to private forest and village forest. The reason is that the hills are all occupied and the valleys are, sorry, it's vice versa. In reserve forest, the forests are left because inaccessible. So private forest and village forest, they are in the valleys. They are occupied by villagers and also by plantations. Coming to the conclusion, to answer all the questions that I have, the abundance of epiphytes was observed highest in private forest, followed by village forest and reserve forest. The species richness showed of epiphytes showed that the curve is not reaching an asymptote, which means that I need more sampling efforts to get the species richness. And the observed species was highest in village forest, followed by reserve forest and private forest. The most abundant group of epiphytes in private forest were hilly epiphytes, mainly in the lower trunk. In village forest, orchids were occupying the inner canopy. In reserve forest, ferns were abundant and occupied the upper trunk. And for the species correlation shows that there are no difference in species composition. The environmental variables are factors that can explain the effect of the difference in species richness and abundance of epiphytes. These are my references. I would like to thanks Professor Kumar Qureshi and Dr. Bashir Ma'am and also Dr. Amit, and thank you.
You suggested that private forests have more epiphytes than village forests. So, what are the factors you think in terms of ownership which promote higher epiphyte richness or the structure of the forest in private forest than other reserve forest than Forget the reserve forest because it's a different elevation, but at least village forest.
Village forests will have more epiphytes, you're saying?
You said that private forests have more
Abundance, abundance.
abundance.
Yes, because there is that species that people have they conserve, right? The particle for commercial farming, yes. So the abundance will be more. For orchids, abundance is more in village forest. Why? Because village forests will have lopping. The because even though I haven't collected data for um, socio-economic survey, whether they how much lopping they have used or they have used, yes, but then they I mean that orchids are more abundant because it's like they need sunlight. So they have these filter canopies. They are perfect nourishment for for orchids.
Indonesia. Uh, One question, you chose three types of forests.
Yes.
Private, village, and reserve forest. So my question is, why do you not choose other types of forests? Because in terms of ownership, we know that there are various kinds of terms of traditional ownership. For
Yes.
example, you will have sacred grove forest, you will have king's forest, you will have also wildlife parks which are more protected than this. So the reason I'm asking that is because I don't know, would you have seen a different trend? Because those types of forests seem to have maybe more protection, maybe more diversity.
So the thing is, sacred groves are not present in my study site. That's why I was not able to take it as one of the language types.
Right. You said piper long pepper is the most
Yes.
abundant species. Isn't that an artifact that people are cultivating it or propagating it instead of? I mean, why do you think a commercially propagated crop and not what is naturally left there? Right? It has given a very different picture.
So there are two species of piper. Piper longum grows wild, so it's wild species. There is another species. It's palm. It's piper beetle. That one can it can it I mean they can do that, but for piper longum it's wild species.
There's one more question by Akhilan, which I believe your model has already answered. He's asking what are the conservation measures used for the commercial species? Do they actively propagate them?
No, no, they don't propagate them.
Very interesting study. So are you concluding that undergoing disturbance is somewhat positively influencing the abundance of the orchids?
Um,
Is it positively influencing or negatively?
the abundance of orchids. So I can't say it right now, but it might because uh, lopping a branch, which means that branch is a habitat, a microhabitat for certain species. So I'm not sure if I can say right now that it is having a negative or positive impact on the orchid species, but I will need more sampling efforts um, or extend my study to understand this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to the rest of the M.Sc batch as well for providing an interesting set of studies. I now request Dr. Lalan to take over.
So we come to the end of the dissertation conference. In order to wrap up, I will request Pallas to provide his comments.
Thank you, Lalan. I will request Dr. Arthur from the site or his overall.
Thank you, sir. This is my first time
all the all the hard work in the dissertation to them. And nearly 90% of the presentation dealing with human wildlife interface, which is a pretty issue in the current scenario. So I'm it's a good thing. And during the presentation, I can imagine the way you must be dealing with the forest department, knowing how to work in wildlife and all these things is a very important uh, learning in the beginning under the mentorship of some of the very brilliant mentors in WI. And so I wish you all the best and in the future. And this is the beginning, so you will be facing lots of things, lots of challenges in the future. So and most of the students we were what they're going to do with after M.Sc. So most of them are interested in research. That's also again a good sign. So carry on and all the best all of you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Pallas, for this question on growth of birds.
So, yeah, I really loved your talks overall. I think they were brilliant. Enjoyed them. Nice diversity of topics. I can see that we, from my generation, we've gone from a large mammal population, so that's good. And plants, I think that was very nice to see that we are working on plants as well. Questions were mostly clear, I thought, and it's very apparent that the WI oral tradition of going out and working hard in the field is still. So I can see the hard work sample sizes in terms of the amount of scan sampling done, those sort of things are very easy to see that you have done that. In terms of the slides, I thought that they were very clear. I mean, there's no, we had this tendency of doing very flashy presentations 1 year ago. That's gone away. So we have clear, small number of words, more explanation than the presenter gives, very clear, very professional graphs, of course, and non-graph graphics part of it was lovely. So the communication aspects are very nice, and I suspect there's a lot of mock presenting going on, and a lot of feedback going on right there. So I think kudos to the faculty do that. So the presentations are excellent. I thought, interestingly, I saw that there were a few things where rudiments or experiments were being done. So that was something nice that I found was slightly different than last time I have. And so before after kind of an experiment, those sorts of things. I think we can, of course, it's very hard to do this in wildlife, but it's still being attempted. So I think that's wonderful. Hopefully, people take this further and go experiment and all of that goes on. In terms of spatial scales, I saw that some pieces incorporated a variety of spatial scales within that, and that was wonderful to see. And but there was a diversity of scales associated across different pieces as well. So that was good. In terms of statistics, I see that NMBS and Alstom is in favor this year. So everyone does it. NMBS, Alstom, and GLM. GLMM is not so much. Maybe a couple of years later, it's when the GLMM zero was on Mars. So, but no, just kidding. So I think yeah. So that is fine. But complicated statistics have this nasty habit of coming and biting us in the back. We don't know what they actually do. So there is some element of caution that has to be done with this. I don't understand them very well, but from what I understood, they seem mostly appropriate, sometimes a little bit less so. I was worried about pseudo replication in a lot of the cases. So that is something that really needs to be thought of. Many times it's unavoidable in terms of the sampling, the number of sampling units that are appropriate to what you're doing are simply available in the 3-4 months that you can sample. But then you really need to think about whether you want to do such a study or not, and whether you should actually ignore the pseudo replication and present statistically significant findings. And then probably when you take into level, take into account individual level variation, they might not go into it. That is an element of caution that we need to think about. Spatial autocorrelation again, with a lot of great case studies is something that people need to think area kind of or rare fashion graphs and those sorts of things, which is good. But no explicit kind of calculations. And maybe some pieces, some could have incorporated those in that study. Cause and effect, interpretations from correlations is something that I noticed a lot of people doing. You have to be very cautious about making cause-effect relationships when you not have either experiments or structural equation models or those kind of cause-effect kind of. So I mean, one can kind of speculate about cause and effect, but you're not demonstrating it with correlations. So that is, we have to be cautious in terms of the conclusions that we reach. Of course, we can't possibly do these things, but at least don't let's immediately jump to saying that they are cause and effect. Last thing I want to say is that from the thesis that I had, the 4-5 thesis that I had, and the presentations, it's very apparent that people have done a lot of hard work and incorporated the comments that we have given. So kudos to you for that. And I thought that was wonderful. The last few days, people have come across and so I thought wonderful, it was really wonderful. And my tradition of doing really good work is quite
I request Dr. Goyal. I don't say he's the senior most, but yes, he doesn't look senior most, but he is senior most. Thank you, Dr. First of all, I would like to thank everyone that I will English to the tremendous knowledge. Ranging from plant to the animal and domestic to the wild. So I am really appreciative. One of the important things which I have noticed because I have been working for so many years with all MSc is that amount of the confidence you put work on, amount of the hard work which you have put, and amount of the pain you have taken to analyze the data within 3 to 4 months. That's the one is a really commendable job we have done. Probably by the 20 hours everyone can do. That's one of the things. So I should congratulate to everyone what Abhijit has said that you are really done a good job. One of the things which I found contrasting difference between the past and I joined. I still remember when I joined this institute, and there were 10, 12, US people scientists came, and we were asked to give a presentation. And when I gave a presentation, my topic was ecology of Indian plant fox. After my presentation, one of the US scientists said, "Can you study the ecology of plant fox in 3 years?" Although he spent his whole life to write that book. So one of the contrasting things that every presentation is very objective, hypothesis and question oriented. They never deviated from all these things. So this is the thing you have really achieved from international professionalism, and I would request you try to retain in your future. So this is a contrast move from what I have seen in my life, and that's one of the things which I find very professionalism you have developed, and please retain this for your future. Be very specific. Another thing which I like very much that everybody was completely focused. That's one of the very important things, and you have to stick time to that time. So this is one of the another things which I have noticed. You have done a wonderful job. What we say, there are some cause and effect that humans is very very hard to assess everything. Plan the experiments, but you have made an attempt. You have tried to learn those approaches which can be used in the future when you join the research lab. So this is the one thing is very very important, and actually I have enjoyed a lot, and I think and everybody responded the question answer independently. So this is a wonderful thing you have gained the knowledge how to face the audience and how to answer the question. So I wish you everyone a wonderful future career, and please stick to the what you have objective hypothesis and all they will just in the era of science. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Goyal. Just I take a minute to conclude. I am thankful to Dr. Mahapatra, Dr. Abhay, and Dr. Goyal for their comment. This is my last M.Sc here at RII, and almost I attended all 18 M.Sc. I remember almost, and I really congratulate all of you. You've done a very good job, and also reflect how faculty and student relationship goes along. So in the beginning there are all these big ones smaller creatures or smaller animals, and so also M.Sc. So it's very nice. And what Dr. Mahapatra said, that was our focus in our M.Sc in comparison to other M.Sc. No competition in that sense about institutions, but our focus on field and making sure that our M.Sc and our researchers actually experience. This is making sure that you experience independently how to run a small project from logistics to running yourself and the whole process so that we prepare you for future. As Dr. Mahapatra rightly said, that when you get into big picture, bigger projects, how you can conduct yourself. So all of you done a pretty good job. And I personally prefer people going into fields. All of you have done that and collect data, analyze. My personal preference always was that you collect lot of data, get confused, analyze, sort it out, and because you have that, it's a learning. And I'm seeing, as Dr. Advait was stating, that earlier where we always people and both students and researchers and faculty was looking for big papers, but that pioneer science has changed. It was early era, and now publishing from M.Sc requires a lot. I mean, there's a lot of publishing articles, and I really appreciate all of you that majority of you stuck to answering questions what you asked and analyzing that. And what Dr. Advait has said, that I still feel that simpler analysis is always better and natural history is more important. If you understand ecology, statistics will follow and not vice versa. So the less of it, but I still prefer that. It's not statistics which answering things. It's your logic, and maintain that. I wish all of you good luck, and the future M.Sc is going to in few months going to get into field. Good luck to them, and I hope they have a good learning. And to the audience here in the hall and online, thank you all of you. And sorry if I hurt anybody by stopping asking questions. I just want to make sure that you maintain time. Good luck, everybody. Thank you.
I would just like to give a short thank you to certain people. One is Dr. Samrat, who's been helping after our co-director had to leave briefly. So Dr. Samrat has been stepping in and helping in every way. So our appreciation goes to him. And also both our external examiners. I mean, their room is not open yet. We still have the Bible verse this afternoon. But I would like to thank them since Dr. Putin could not be able to join us for the farewell dinner. They came all the way here and they provided their inputs, which were very helpful for the students. And the students also talked to me yesterday. They really appreciated whatever Bible has gone. So thank you for that. Thank you for your presence here and your time here. And I would especially like to thank Goyal sir because he has been here since the beginning. I think the first presentation, and he's been sitting here throughout. And I really thank you for providing me that. Yeah, yes, sir. So thank you, sir. And special thank you goes to Sir and Vishnu, and also Varun and Dr. Ashish. We had called them for the mock presentations, which greatly helped shape the final presentations and the final dissertation. So without them, this would not have been possible. And I think all the students would also like to thank them as well. And on their behalf, I thank all of them. And also the 19 M.Sc, they have been planning all these. We couldn't have done. I couldn't have done this by myself. So there's a social media team, there's a logistics team, there's an audio-visual team, there's a preparing team, and they have put in all together all this. So 19 M.Sc. Throughout the course with us. He has been helping for everything. We thank him. And also IIT staff for arranging everything. And we thank them, all IIT staff. We thank them truly. Habitation team, we thank you as well, and also to the team director and